Oh, hi there, guys. So there was news over the last few days that around 200 pubs have closed in the first 6 months of 2025. Now, clearly, pubs in this country have been under the cosh for a very long time. So, according to data from the British Beer and Pub Association, between 2010 and 2022, around 13,000 pubs closed down. So, in that context, 200 pubs closing in the 6 months to June could actually be seen as an improvement. And I wanted to comment today a little bit about GB News' framing of this argument, because they seem to be suggesting that history only started in 2024, when Labour were elected to government. And I'm going to make the case here that this has been a long-standing trend for many, many years. So let's have a look first at what they're saying on GB News about this issue.
See, Mark, why do they see pubs as such a cash cow when you know how difficult it is to run, to maintain, to keep those buildings that you've got in order, to keep the staff together? You have to sell food whether you want to or not, because it's the only way you're going to make any sort of money. But why is it that people in Whitehall, civil servants or whatever, see you guys as the forever giving cash cow?
Well, if that's how they feel, they've got it wrong. They just don't understand, and they are killing an industry that provides a huge amount of jobs and pays a huge amount in tax.
And also gives a community, and also makes, and Mark, from my point of view, loving a pub as I do, and having lived in villages across the land, I would say it's the heart of a village. It's a community, and it's a place where people meet, and it just gives heart to places.
The heart
as well.
and soul,
heart and soul
and
of the place.
They're taking that away.
Absolutely.
And that's the bit you can't put a price on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, we've lost our post offices.
Yeah.
And we're
Banks.
losing, so many of. We've lost our banks, we've lost our post offices, and the pub is going next.
So now let's have a little think about why pubs have actually been closing down in record numbers since 2010. First off, we have to recognise, don't we, that nobody in this country has got any disposable income. The Tories presided over the worst squeeze in living standards since the Napoleonic War, and there was always going to be a cost to that. If you have a system where wages routinely rise less fast than the cost of living, and where you suck demand out of the economy via austerity, of course people are going to have less money, and they're less likely to spend their money in their local community, whether that be at pubs, in shops, or at fish and chip shops, or at restaurants. Austerity was a political decision, and there were plenty of people who warned against it at the time, but the Tories and their mates in the media, they knew best, didn't they? Incidentally, I wonder who the presenters and the owners of GB News were backing between 2010 and 2022, and what their preferred economic policies were during that period. So, these people, they might not have been working at GB News back then, but this is what they wanted. This is their economic model, and they've got to own it. So then secondly, and linked to that, we've got the increased costs of running a pub. So living standards issue is not just an individual issue, is it? It's also one that affects businesses. So, inflation has led to increased input costs. Business rates have gone up steadily. Staff costs have increased. Rents have gone up. And, none of these trends are new, are they? They've been going on for 20 years or more. But, of course, it's been exacerbated since COVID. And again, it didn't begin last year in 2024. And then we're moving on to demographic changes in our society. Young people, they don't drink that much. Again, they haven't got any money. And then secondly, if you want to get young people into pubs, you're going to have to offer food or do something different and interesting to get them to part with their hard-earned cash. Otherwise, they're just going to go to the gym. And then finally, the pub has always been seen as a sort of community asset in this country. What she talked about in the video there, it's the heart of the community, isn't it? But what have we consistently done in this country since 1979? We've tried to smash any notion of community. All the bonds that bind us together have been weakened, and so why do we think pubs are going to be any different? Again, this is what the owners and the presenters of GB News wanted, because this is their ideology in action. Their rationale has always been, we need to make sure the trade unions are smashed, we need to sell all our industry to the developing world, we need to encourage the banking system and financialisation, we need people to be individual and atomised, so that they're more productive within the capitalist system. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too, can you? You didn't want community back then, and now look at what the consequences are. Community's been plundered. The notion that pubs have started closing down in record numbers since 2024 and Labour's election victory doesn't stack up. Of course, Labour hasn't helped the situation because of their employers' NI tax increase. But the issues that I've mentioned are long-standing trends in our economy and in our society. It would be really helpful if GB News could actually talk about the stuff that I've mentioned in this video, rather than just blame Labour and the civil service randomly, because then we might be able to move forward as a country. But no, why do that when you can just take the easy option and blame Labour for all the bad stuff that's going on? Personally, I feel really sorry for pub landlords, but things are not going to improve if we just lie to people about what's really going on and who's really responsible. But anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Please let me know in the comments what you think about our pubs. But yeah, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.